Welcome back. Time to tell you more lame folktales and myths. Last time you might remember we talked about Fafnir, the giant wolf that liked to nom on people's hands. Again with the nom! Now, this next story is also about a giant animal, but this one comes from the Finnish national epic, and this one is a little bit more lame. It's lame because the giant animal in this case is just an ox. You know, a giant ox whose head supposedly went up to the clouds. And why was this hormone-bred monstrosity necessary? Well, he was supposed to be slaughtered for the feast in Ilmarinen's wedding. Ilmarinen, of course, was the blacksmith who created the Sampo, the Horn of Plenty, that churned out golden food for its owner. This guy. Well, whoever it was that bred this giant bull obviously noticed a little problem, the fact that he couldn't be killed. And the only guy that could kill the bull was a random shape-shifting man that rose from the sea. But this is where this myth gets a little awesome, I have to say, because in the original text, this man is described as being black. So a shape-shifting black guy rises from the sea to kill the giant ox. Fucking white folks don't go me to no party unless they gotta kill a bull. I'm kidding, of course. In the original text, the word black is probably used to describe the color of the man's hair, but to modern readers, the way it's represented on the printed page, you know, that kind of sounds like that. Our next story comes from ancient Egypt, which has one of my favorite pantheons because obviously all the Egyptian gods have such awesome names. Amun-Ra, Anubis, and the heroes of this story, Horus and Seti, or Seth as it's sometimes written. In this particular story, Horus was told by his mother to defend the people of Lower Egypt from the evil of Seti. Seti wasn't a perpetually evil god in the Egyptian mythologies, but he is usually depicted as something of a bad guy, which is why there usually needs to be a god to oppose him, and which is why Hollywood and other video games like to depict him as an evil god. However, Seti doesn't want to fight Horus, and this is the part where the story gets kinda gay and kinda gross. Instead of fighting Horus, Seti wants to seduce him and have sex with him. To use a baseball metaphor, he wants to be the pitcher. Now, for whatever reason, Seti's plan does not work. Horus is not seduced by his wiles, and in fact, once he gets close enough, he rips one of his testicles off. So yes, this is the story of how Horus conquered Seti. I mean, isn't that any kind of victory? You ripping off another guy's ball? That is just cruel beyond belief. And if it wasn't bad enough, Horus actually goes around parading Seti's semen as a sign that he has defeated him. You know, I don't have to say much about it. You just imagine it in your head, what this sort of display of his victory must look like, and you'll just loll. Look, it is the semen of my enemy! I have defeated him! Yeah, Horus, that's neat. Oh, get that shit out of my face! Now, our next story comes from the Bible. And if you've read the Bible enough, you will begin to notice that there's a lot of really bad stories in there. Especially in the Old Testament, but also a little bit in the New. Now, I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain what Sodom and Gomorrah are, because that is, of course, a major point used in the various religious groups' campaigns against homosexuality. Although I'd like to point out that when I was in school, in religion class, our teacher strategically skipped all these nasty stories from the New Testament, and the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is probably the nastiest. Not just because of the crimes committed by the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, which were apparently inhabited by complete sadistic assholes. Most people, of course, remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah because of the story of Lot, the guy that God spared from the destruction, sent him, his 2 daughters, and his wife off, and of course, although God told them not to look back at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, you know, his wife did and turned into a pillar of salt. But it's the ending to the story of Lot that is just incredibly disturbing. Because apparently Lot's 2 daughters were not the 2 sharpest tools in the shed. They thought now that Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed, there's no way for them to get married and have children, so what do? They get their father drunk and have sex with him so that they can have children. I mean, what? So apparently, God is put off by homosexuality, bestiality, the torturing of guests, and doing all sorts of cruel things just to get your jollies off, but incest is just completely fine. And we're not just talking any God here, we're talking the Old Testament God who will smite you for Blasphemy. But because of this, I do elect Sodom and Gomorrah to be the nastiest story from the Bible. Not just because of what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah, but also the nastiness does not even end there. Well, now let's move to a completely new topic of mythology, vampires. Because vampires are kinda lame. And I don't mean just the sparkly ones. I mean, think about the traditional weaknesses of a vampire. Crosses, holy water, garlic, and they need to suck the blood of the living to live. I mean, these guys aren't monsters. They're just clearly anemic and have an autoimmune deficiency of some kind. Nevertheless, this has not stopped vampires from appearing in pretty much every culture around the world. Because while I admit vampires are lame, the idea of somebody coming in at night and sucking your blood is kinda creepy. But how to make a vampire even more lame? Well, enter the Chinese hopping corpse. Now, the Chinese hopping corpse actually resembles more a zombie than a vampire, but later on, the blood-sucking element was incorporated in the story, so technically the hopping corpse is essentially the Chinese vampire. But the descriptions of the hopping corpse are more comedic than, scary, because it's a decomposed body that, like its name implies, gets around by hopping on one foot, I guess. And I don't know why. Oh, by the way, the more appropriate name for the hopping corpse would be the screaming corpse, because apparently the act of coming back to life is so painful that hopping corpses just don't shut up, they just scream. And weaknesses? Well, there's no actual way of defeating a hopping corpse, but there are several ways of distracting it. I mean, the best way to get away is to cross some running water. I know in the original Chinese this means that you're supposed to cross a river, and apparently a hopping corpse cannot cross a river. Why? I have no idea. Does the same apply if there's just like a little tiny stream? Or a garden hose? No, but of course everybody knows the best way to distract the Chinese hopping corpse is by throwing a bag of rice into the fields. Because apart from its other crappy qualities, the Chinese hopping corpse apparently has OCD and will not pursue its victim until it has stopped to pick up and count every single piece of rice that has fallen onto the ground. Yes, vampires are lame, but the Chinese hopping corpse, or the Chinese screaming, hopping, zombie vampire crossbreed, does take the cake for being the worst vampire of them all. And finally, we come back to Norse mythology again, and I'm sorry if somebody feels that I'm picking too many stories from the Norse mythology, but this one was just too good to pass up. This is the story of Baldur's demise. This guy. Now, Baldur was this god who had made all the elements swear that they could not harm him. So basically what this meant, he had asked every animal and every plant in creation that they could not harm him. All except the humble Mistletoe. And Baldur did actually kind of think, is it a bad thing that I neglected this one plant? And he's talking about this to some gods, and they're saying, nah, it's not a big deal. But oh wait, who should happen to overhear this conversation? None other than Loki, the trickster of the gods. And he devises this incredible prank to pull on Baldur. Now obviously in Asgard, the gods get a little bored, and they start to kill time by throwing stuff at Baldur. Yeah, that's a great idea, because obviously nothing can hurt him. But there's one god who's feeling neglected, Huth, the blind god. Because he can't see, he can't throw stuff at him. Oh, but who should happen to help him but Loki? And he says, here, take this bow and arrow. I'll help you shoot it at Baldur. So Huth is just happy with glee that he's finally going to be able to chuck something at this other god. Loki puts the arrow in the bow and he helps him aim it and he shoots and Baldur falls dead. Yes, the mighty god Baldur is defeated with an arrow made of mistletoe. Now Huth, of course, is traumatized for life, which is a long life considering he's a god. But the other gods, they kind of wonder, what? But eventually somebody figures out, it was Loki. And for once in a lame story about somebody dying from an incredibly lame weakness, I have to say, Loki does get punished. He gets tied down to a rock and a snake taunts him. Suck on that, bitch! But you know what? Why was this story so lame? Well, it's basically the same story as that of the Achilles heel. In case you did not know, yes, there was a guy named Achilles who was dipped in immortality juice, I guess, but whoever dipped him in it, forgot the fact that he was holding on to his ankle, and that's why his ankle was his weak spot, and here comes the story of where thus the expression Achilles heel, come from. So if you're a god and you have a weakness, the worst thing you can do is blurt it out. Because there's bound to be another asshole god, someone like Loki, who will be listening and will exploit it. Well, this wraps up this Bottom 10. See you on the next one!